Well, hello everybody. It's the 6th of April today, and well, it's a lovely sunny day out here. You can probably see the blue sky behind me, but there's still a biting cold wind blowing. Now, I don't actually have my dead cat on the end of my microphone, so it may pick up the noise of the wind. Sorry about that if it does, but the bees don't like it, so I'm just not going to put it on for now anyway. So it's the first day that I'm getting a chance to take a look through some of the colonies. Now I can see from the activity that's going on outside the bees, dandelion actually just started flowering properly around here maybe in the last 3 days or so, and the good, the sunshine today has brought more dandelion out, and I can see that the bees are getting excited about it. So I'm just going to take the opportunity to go through some of the colonies. There are a few here in this home apiary that I'm a bit concerned about. They're the ones I'm actually going to be starting with. Most other people will show you their strong colonies, the colonies that they know are the strongest first, and say, oh wow, look at that. But no, I'm going to start with the ones that I have a little concern about. I just want to see if there is a viable colony there, if there's signs of viability but they've just gone very small, then I may make a decision to give them some extra frames of brood, maybe some bees. That's something that can be done at this time of the year with very little repercussions. So the plan is just to go through some of the smaller colonies very quickly, because as I've said, the wind is biting and it's quite cool still. It's nearly 1 o'clock now at this stage, so if I leave it much later, the day will be gone. So that's the plan. So let's get cracking here. And the first one I'm going to show you is this nuke here. You can see everything else is active. Now, there was a great flurry of activity around here about 45 minutes ago or so, but this colony has no activity outside it. Now, when I came out earlier, actually 45 minutes ago, there was quite a lot of activity going on outside it, which was quite unusual. So I'm just going to take a dip in. It may be the case that there is no queen here. So let's see what's going on. You can see there, there's a bee gone in, but by and large, very, very little activity. And now there's a bee gone in, or going in with pollen, which is a good sign. Looks like blackthorn pollen. That's a good sign, obviously, that there's pollen. But at this time of the year, when pollen is readily available, it's not really an indication of anything as such. Earlier on in the season, it's a sign that the colony is starting to brood if you see pollen going in. But by this stage, where sources of pollen is kind of becoming plentiful, it's not really an indication of anything. But you can see the last couple of bees that have gone in there are carrying pollen. So let's take a look in and see. Now, I know that this colony, anytime I've lifted the lid on it, they do come across as being very aggressive. So let's see how we get on. So, little puff of smoke in the entrance. Just let them know we're coming. And my smoker is first time been lit up this year, and it's a little bit off form. Anyway, let's see. Now, I fed these earlier, but they have been just shrinking up smaller and smaller. Now we have a bit of very, very small, look, on two frames of bees. That's not great. They have used up a lot of their stores, which is quite surprising, because they had at least, I know one frame they didn't really get to draw, but everything else I think they had jam-packed with stores. But all I want to see here today is that there is brooding going on, and then give them a chance. So as you can see, it's not something to get excited about anyway. It's not a colony to get excited about. It may be that there is no queen. So if you see there, they had ivy honey in, but very little. They actually were quite dry. So I can take that out. And they're a little bit better behaved today than they are normally. No. Oh, there's brood there, look. Brood. You can see it across top, sealed brood. So that's something that I don't want to open them too much more. That's a sign, obviously, there's a queen there. And there is viability. So what I'm going to do is, see how they come up and attack my hive tool every time I move it. They're not a pleasant colony now, by any stretch of the imagination. But we don't want to leave this colony open too long. Oh, there's plenty of brood there. Plenty of brood, and there's the queen. You can see her there. So I'm not going to keep them open any longer. I'm just going to... they're not big enough yet to... there's just a little bit of propolis there. That's stopped me from putting the frame down. They're not big enough yet, but that's a positive sign. So what may have been the issue here is this was a late nuke that was set up, and it may be that there's a nice pattern there to the brood, as you could see, but they might not have collected enough stores. That's kind of just centralizing them a little bit. They might not have collected enough stores, and I did feed them with syrup, but they left some of that syrup behind in the feeder, and it just might have meant that they kind of got isolated a little bit. Now they seem to be tackling their stores a lot more now, but and they're moving into that fondant, so that's a positive sign. So we can give them, they have brood about to hatch there in a week, so not spectacular, but it's still, there's viability there. I am willing to give it the chance. So the next two I want to show you are these two here. This one here, for my notes that I have, this was a late requeen, and I see I haven't changed the tag on it. It's still a red tag. I'm nearly certain that the queen here isn't marked, but that's my recollection of it. Now I'm going to go through it to see actually what's happening here, because this is one that I am concerned about. There's very few bees in it, but again, there might be, you know, I took a late split off this one. It was quite a strong colony, and I split it, and then I requeened it itself with a different queen. You might say why, but that was the way. I took the old queen out of it and brought her off to another apiary. This one here, not quite sure what is going on with it, but I want to take a look and see. It got quite small, but again, I did take a split off it. Now it was in July that I took the split off it, but that seemed to have kind of knocked it back. I just want to see how it's getting on now. It was quite isolated over towards, say, the right hand side of the box when I checked it back in February, and they had isolated themselves and used the stores in that end, and all the rest of the stores were over this end, and if I hadn't got to them then, they were going to starve out. So that could have been what shrunk their numbers. So let's take a look in this one first. As you can see, there's very little activity going in there. This corner here, surprisingly, I mean, you can see bees going in with pollen, nice loads of pollen. But this corner here, it looks sheltered. But in actual fact, it gets fairly blasted with the wind. So I just want to be quick. So just to show you, it's a very small cluster towards the front end of the box. They have these frames jammed with stores. There's a bit of water ingress coming in here somewhere, or condensation from the colony that can't escape. So I'm going to have to remove you'll see I have the plug on the top of the crown board there. That could be the issue, because it's all up on the end here where there are no bees. But I just want to take a look down here and see if there is brooding going on, because these could be just the remnants of winter bees. So look again, just to show you down there, jam packed with ivy honey, and that is going to prevent them from growing. So if I see that there's viability there, on the next inspection I'll be whipping out some of those frames and putting in a few empty comb. So I'll just remove a frame away from the cluster that I can see. You can see stores left there. The lower end of it is there's nothing in it, but the bees are unlikely to kind of move on to those yet. They're going to start brooding up higher up in the frames if they can. It's a frame of pollen. Very dark comb too. But we have brood, and I'm going to show you now. I don't want to. Very nice so far. You can see lovely brood pattern there for this time of the year. Okay, so that's 1, 2. There's another comb there with brood. Bit of mould down on the lower end there. That's not ideal. And you can see where there was brood down there, and it was sort of died in the comb. Again, not ideal. A very nice pattern there, and there's some of it hatching. So I'm just going to leave them be. I'm going to move them a little further away from the entrance, and move them more into the centre there. Okay, so that's the extent of it. 3 frames of brood. 3 frames with brood on it. One side is actually solid stores. Colonies at this time of the year never look too nice. There's lots of water, slugs, mould. but I'm happy to see that there's 3 solid frames. Sorry, I should say 3 frames with solid brood patterns on them. Now, so again, there's potential. So it is just a case there of as the weather warms up, introducing another frame of brood into them. Now, because I was standing in the entrance, I was standing in the way of the entrance, I sort of blocked traffic. And there's a good bit of traffic there coming in now. You have to remember there's a lot of field bees out, so what you see inside obviously isn't its full complement. It's nice to see so much pollen going in. That's a very positive sign. I know I said earlier that pollen going in at this time of the year isn't really an indication of anything, but when you see big loads of pollen going in and lots of it, it's a reasonably fair indication that there is brooding going on in there. So let's take a look at this one. I'm hoping that this one, I fed this one, as I said, they were isolated, or they had isolated themselves over to the far right of the box. But again, they were only covering 2 to 3 frames at the time. It was too kind of cold, obviously, in February to do anything with them. So I just hoped for the best. Big loads of pollen going in here as well, so let's see. They're making their way through. Let's see. 2 empty bags of fondant. And a third nearly finished. And I can see already that they are now covering, there's bees here on this frame. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's bees on 6 frames, and they're spreading out. There's a few bees on the outer edges there. So I know already that that's a positive sign from what I saw earlier. Now, one of these frames right at the end is just foundation, so that'll show you it. Took a late split off them, as I said, and they it sort of set them back. There's a frame of stores, and that looks kind of like might actually be, it's not ivy anyway. I was going to say syrup, but it's not, because I did feed them when I realised they were set back, Now, as I also said, this site, and I've said it before in previous videos, this site gets walloped with wind. I sort of keep them here because this is where I live, and it means at least I have some bees where I live, but it's not really an ideal site at all by any stretch of the imagination. I have them here up against the hedge, but just whatever it is, we seem to get whipped with wind, and it's quite strong wind as well. And there always seems to be a bite to it, like cool wind, so it really does impact the bees. And if I compare to other sites that I have, they pull in nice crops of honey, and sometimes I get 7 or 8 boxes up on colonies, but it is just if it's any way poor at all, this site is surely, there's nectar here in this, which is good to see, but again, that's a dark mildewy comb, and there's quite a lot of bee dead down on the bottom, quite a lot. So this, to me, even though you can see there's stores there, it seems to me like this colony had sort of isolated itself over on one end, and during the cold spell that we had with the snow and that's what set them back. But we have brood, small enough pattern, but it's a solid pattern at the same time. Yeah, so I'm not going to do any more. Actually, the next frame looks like it's full down to the bottom almost. So I don't need to see the queen. I know there's brood there, and I know, so from that I know there is a queen there, and that's all I want to know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually centralize them. See, this end here again is foundation, and this is despite the fact that they were fed syrup. Now they're a nice calm colony, this, so you know, actually don't really need smoke. I can blow down and yeah. See that? That'll show you. You might say rather poor form on my part that a colony like this has foundation still in it. But you know, when you are in expectation of a good ivy flow, for example, and I've done it before, you know, taking late splits, and you know there's a good ivy flow then that follows and the colony does well, brooding continues right on until the end of October. Because of the flow, you know, brooding's in full swing, and that's it, you know. Whereas last year was just one of those years, it was just, no matter what you did, the results were poor. Now, but from what I see there, there's still potential. Now, this one, not 100% sure what's going on here. There is quite a lot of poop going on outside, which is a sign of nosema. That only started today though, so it could be that they've moved over in the colony and they're starting to eat their way through stores that have kind of gone sour or something, or you know, that have gone rancid. Maybe they were taking down syrup, because I did feed them syrup that they didn't get to cap, and that it could be the result of that. So we'll see, because I do notice that happens if there's syrup, but because it's only today that they started showing signs of that kind of going on, and it's a bit, you know, nosema is something that they kind of suffer during the winter months really, and you might see it happening then in the very early spring, but when there's flying going on, it's rare enough to see it. So hopefully it's nothing more sinister, but let's take a look inside anyway. We'll have a look. Again, this is a colony. There's a nice bit of activity outside them today again, which is unusual for them, but they're a colony that kind of tend to be a bit on the angry side anytime I've opened the lid on them. Now, they do seem to be building up, which is a good sign. So we'll take a look and see what is going on. Well, now, ain't that a surprise? Let's make sure our queen isn't on the top, and she's not. They're actually not looking too bad. So I'm not really sure. There's no signs of pooping going on inside the hive, which is good. See, it could be as well, the sun is shining, these bees want to get out, but when they come out they get hit by this easterly kind of wind that's blowing here, and it's quite cold. You know, there could be young bees there that are loaded to the hilt with food, or I mean with waste that they want to get rid of. It's their first day flying. They get hit by the cold and they realise, oh, I can't fly, and they just poop outside. That's another knock-on effect of the cold, the wind here, the site that we are in. But this is alright. So not as big when I go down into it, but it was a positive enough sign to see from the top there. Nice little pattern of brood there, and some brood on that side, so that's good. And I don't really want to do any more for the moment. There's my queen. You can see her there, the green dot. So, yeah, spotty enough pattern with the brood at the moment, but on this side it's a lot more solid. So they're showing a bit more potential than I thought, but at the same time they're nothing to get too excited about either. Now, ideally what I would like to do is, if the weather was a bit better, I would turn those frames or rotate them around to allow the bees to kind of, you know, to have the brood kind of more towards the back end, and then the bees could start working their way through the stores towards the front. But I don't want to go into a massive movement exercise right now when it's as cold as it is. They have a little bit of fun on there. Ideally, actually, maybe they have enough stores, so feeding them with syrup probably isn't a great idea, but they could do with syrup at the same time for easy access. It might promote a bit of quicker build-up, but yeah, decisions. Now, let's move on. So this one here is a late queen job, late requeen. You can see it has a green tag, but yeah, I mean, I did notice that queens from last year, there was poor enough matings last year, and I've had a good few queen failures. This one, for example, is gone. So I'm going to take a look in. I know there is a colony here, but it's quite small. It's towards the front end of this box. I have these frames orientated in the warm way. I gave it some candy, but yeah, it just seems to be shrinking up smaller and smaller. But I do want to see if there is a viable queen there. I'll know that by the brood pattern that's in it, and so that'll let me kind of, or give me an idea of what I want to do for the next occasion. But I'm going to, they're towards, as I said, the front end of the box, so I'm going to move them slightly back a bit in the box if there is viability there. If not, I'll just close them up again, and then we'll shake them out in the next day or two. So always when you think, you know, very little going on here, no activity at the entrance, and you stand in front of it for a few minutes and then you walk away, suddenly there's this influx of bees. You say, where did they come from? Because they weren't flying in before. So kind of makes things look a little bit more positive than maybe I believe they are. Well, they have eaten all that candy I put on. Stores all down through the back here, but you can see I don't know if you can see that. They are very much confined to the front end of the box and very, very, very small. So I'm not too hopeful about a viable colony being here. And look, every time I open this, I find wasps, queen wasps. And they've been killed by the bees, but they've still managed to make their way in. There's another one. Take a look at that for a frame of stores. I don't know if you can see that because it's in the shade. You know, there's no shortage of stores. One of those classic instances of, well, I'm going to say a classic instance of it, but maybe not, because the cluster here that is there is right up against a frame of stores. So it's a sign that the cluster itself shrunk up very small, very early in the season. Going into the winter, I mean. Now I have referred to this one in the previous video that I did. You can see here, brood that has actually died from being chilled. The bees have started to clean it out, but again they've shrunk up even smaller since. So let's see. But there's nothing unusual about colonies shrinking up like at this time of the year, because the winter bees die off rapid. We have brood, and there's our queen. You can see she's actually unmarked. Don't know if you can see her on the camera there, but it's a spotty enough pattern. And actually, if we look on the other side here, you can see a lot of spotty brood there that are brood that didn't hatch, and it died from being chilled. Not great. Okay. So I'm going to move these back. Kind of. We'll have a look at this frame here and assess if the brood is any better on it. She's laid it up. This is an extremely small colony, but you know, it doesn't look too bad there in terms of brood patterns. So I'm going to give them a chance. There's no like nasty sunken brood or anything. So in another week, that brood should have hatched by the look of it. It's currently in the process of hatching. And we can evaluate then, because if it hasn't hatched, for example, or you know, if the colony isn't showing signs of wanting to grow, ideally these should be moved into a nuke box, you know, give them a better start. But there's plenty of nectar coming in there as well. Now that's actually drone comb, but I'm going to move it in anyway because they've started storing pollen in it. And I'm going to put that frame that I took out towards the front. It's the gamble you take when doing late splits as well, because again, it's as I do with all my colonies really, if I can, I take late splits off them. And the late splits can actually, you know, it is hard on a colony, and so it's a real test for them. So some people might say that that's not a viable colony, and you know, if you were in a proper commercial operation, it wouldn't be a viable colony, because it's going to take time to bring it up to you know, a workable level, or you know, a level that it's actually going to produce a crop of honey, particularly in the early spring. But with a young queen, that's a young queen from late last year, if she's showing promise, colony could build up and still produce, you know, for say the late summer season, honey flow could produce 2 or 3 supers, and why not give it a chance? I don't particularly want to be spending a whole lot of time working, you know, trying to build colonies up when they should be able to do that themselves naturally. But at the same time, when I know that, I suppose I'm part of the reason why that colony has shrunk up so small, and that is because I took a late split off it. Thinking, of course, with a young queen that I was definitely going to have brooding going on well into November, you know, and the temperatures were quite mild. We had flying here, even though this site, as I've said, I have a cold wind blowing across me today. It's, you know, I can feel the coolness in it, but oddly enough, kind of, you know, October, November, December, it was quite mild here, very mild, and the bees in this site were flying right up until Stevens's Day. I think it's from Stevens's Day on then they started clustering up tight. Like, there was still a lot of movement in the clusters. Clusters were very active. In fact, they weren't really clustered at all. It was, you know, the cluster didn't start until the first week in January, for sure. And so, you know, the natural assumption, I suppose, is that, well, if they're that active and if there's that much flying going on, there is potentially a small quantity of brooding going on. And with the ivy flow that went on, right, you know, ivy was still flowering up until the end of November. But for some reason last year, even though, you know, as I've said, October and November were relatively mild and the bees were flying, they just didn't seem to be bringing in the level of or, you know, the quantities of nectar that they normally would have in previous years. I don't know if anybody else found that. You know, if you did, here in Ireland, you know, put it in the comments. What were your observations in relation to the ivy flow last year? For me, anyway, some colonies did okay, built up all right, or filled their comb with ivy nectar. Other colonies that in normal years, I'm going to say, would have filled them, did absolutely zilch, and I did have to then kind of, in a panic, late feed colonies, which I wouldn't normally do. Anyway, let's move on and get a look at another one. So I'm starting to go through some of the bigger ones now. Well, colonies that I know are bigger, and I just wanted to show you a nuke. Well, a queen that I reared last year, and I transferred her into a full-size box, well, a 10-frame box, back in, I think it was September. So just to show you how they developed and what they're looking like now. That is not too bad. You can see there that there's a frame of foundation at the back end. Or maybe you can see that hasn't been drawn at all, but otherwise they filled out that box pretty good. So I'm just going to maybe move that frame of foundation somewhere, not directly into the center, but somewhere sort of second frame in or so, and hopefully they'll start drawing that now that the dandelion has started flowing. So I'm just going to take a quick dip down as well, roughly around where I think the brood is, and see if I can see her, what sort of a pattern she's making. So I'm blocking the entrance now to these bees, so I'm going to get a bit of, see, that side hasn't been drawn, but they started drawing this side. Now Let me see. This colony was fed 1 feeder load of syrup in October. So from a store's point of view, I think they probably had more accessible stores than some of the other colonies. A bit of drone brood here already, it seems. So that's not altogether a good sign. But I mean, otherwise there seems to be a bit a solid enough pattern. I know this queen isn't marked, but oh yeah, look, see, that's a very solid pattern there. So I'm not actually sure what the story with that drone brood is. Hopefully it's not a bad sign that she is laying. It's relatively collected, it's not kind of spattered about. Oh yeah, that's a very solid pattern of brood. Now, I can see there that there's drone brood down in the corner, but that may have been because the comb that this was sourced from, when I was making up the nuke, the split, already had drone brood in it. And that could be the reason behind that, but that is relatively solid. That's nice. This colony had been extremely busy, you know, from the get-go, kind of, as soon as the bees started flying. It was always a sign of hyperactivity out of them. So I always knew it was going to be a positive colony. Whoa, look at this. I'm still blocking them a bit. Here we go. Look at that. Fantastic to see that. So it's not the most convenient spot to get in and work. The objective is obviously this will remain here, this colony will remain at this site, but the nuke box that I have the camera currently stood on, and which we looked at, it was the first one we looked at, will be moving out to an out apiary at some stage, if it develops. So I want to be careful. I don't want to have chilled brood. I also just want to be careful now with, I don't want to squish, I don't like squishing bees, but I definitely don't want to squish queen. I think there's brood on that frame. No, that was a frame pollen. So I'm going to move this one to the outer edge now. It's an older frame anyway. And I'm going to move this one in. And this will give them something to work at. So I'm not going to actually put a super on them just yet. Move this one onto the inside. Now you might say I'm moving the pollen away. That's not ideal. Yeah, of course. But it's there for when they do start building out on those combs and that foundation. Now, fantastic. At least we have a positive here. So these two here are two queens that I reared back. This one was reared in May, and this one then in June. This one actually did very well, boomed, But then come the autumn, like some of the colonies, some other colonies that I have here, sort of had a setback in the autumn for no real apparent reason. Now, I suspected then potential queen failure due to bad mating of the queen. So I gave her a chance, and when I moved her into, I had moved her into a full-size box, a 14 by 12 box, which she had initially filled with bees, and then subsequently, as I said, there was a kind of a setback in autumn. So I moved her into a nuke box, this 6-frame nuke box, in October. Didn't really anticipate that she'd come out of it, to be honest, out of the winter. But so far the signs are relatively positive. This one, as I said, was a queen that I mated, that I reared in June. Sorry, she was mated, I think, near July, but got off to a very slow start. I wasn't 100% sure about her, but was showing very positive signs at the start of this year. Now, a little bit of a setback a couple of days ago. Didn't I take a peek in? I actually had to feed them about 2 weeks back. And I took a peek in there a couple of days ago, about 4 days ago. And I must have forgot to put the block back on. And even though there's a strap going across, the next day I came out and the wind, either overnight or earlier in that day, had actually blown the lid off and the perspex inner cover. And I don't have this riser here, I don't have a foil sheet between, you know, this riser. I have this riser on for the block of fondant that I put on, or the bag of fondant, but the bees didn't look too happy inside anyway, so I'm hoping that hasn't caused them a bit of a setback. They're back fully active today, so that's a good sign. These girls, I'm going to take a look inside first, and then these ones. They are, for some reason, they're a little bit narky, these ones, but, well, that was my experience last year, but we'll see what they're like now. And you might say, why am I going to show you these ones? Kind of when I'm going through the stronger nukes. And yeah, that's right, I went through weaker ones earlier, or ones that I knew were weaker. But these ones and these two here together that I'm about to go into now have been kind of showing signs of growth early on in the year. In February, there was quite a good solid cluster of bees there. Anytime I'd lift up the lid, you know, you'd be able to see a good cluster of bees. So I'm reasonably positive that when I dip down, one is a 14 by 12 box, so it is hard to tell, but that when I dip down, there will be a positive signs inside. So let's get cracking. So nothing to get too excited about here now at the minute, but you have to remember there's a good lot of field bees out. So again, nothing to get overly excited about, but this is a 14 by 12 box, so it's very hard to, you know, in nuke colonies, you see we have bees out to this frame, and that is pretty much a frame of pollen, or pollen with stores obviously, but there's pollen all in this front section, so that's good. And the next frame I have brood, and a decent enough frame of bees. That's not too bad there. Bit of a spotty pattern maybe in the brood, but again, at this time of the year, it's, you know, it's difficult enough to judge. You know, the first, second round of brood, it's happening so intermittently. If you see a kind of a pattern like this one, for example, where the center has more or less hatched, and then you have this rim of brood on the outside, that's a relatively good sign, you know, and that's a solid enough ring around the outside. Now, and there's eggs laid up in the center section already. So again, very positive. This queen is unmarked. So she may be difficult to spot. And funny enough, you know, at this early part of the season, even though you might have, you know, a colony that's not massively populated, queens I find are harder to spot at this time of the year because they haven't grown to full size yet. They blend in a bit better. And they're a little bit more, they scurry a bit more. Anyhow, we don't see her there, but in general, I'm happy enough. It's a little bit of a spotty pattern, but it's not too bad. You know, it's solid enough here on this outer edge. I hope you can see that now because I have the camera pointing down. So I'm not going to go any further. I know I see eggs and I see brood of all stages essentially. So there's no need for me to go down anymore. I really dislike crushing bees and I do try to avoid it, but it does slow me down. So it's positive signs here, and that's kind of what I'm after. You know, we are still only in the first week of April. So, you know, there's a lot of well, we still have time for the likes of this colony to develop sufficiently to move back into a full-size box and give us a crop of honey. And I have no doubt that they will do it. So what I rely on for the bulk of my honey crop is the late summer flow. So the early summer flow, I mean, you know, May to basically the month of May, I suppose, essentially when sycamore comes into flower and that, and horse chestnut. I may get a surplus crop off that. I used to take it off, but I suppose I don't really have the facilities, and I've spoken about this before, and this was the year of the honey house, and yet the honey house have nothing started, and will I ever get to it? Hopefully, but again, it mightn't be this year now at this stage. The beekeeping season has started off, and that's going to take up my time. I should have organised myself during the winter months, but I didn't. I might have mentioned this. I took up a kind of a contract with work that is taking up a lot of my time at the moment, and so maybe beekeeping this year might be a disaster, although let's hope not. So yeah, that's it. Let's get cracking. We'll take a look down into this one and see what they're like, especially after their little upset. Well, look at that. I think here's my answer. They are building comb up here already. Fantastic. Fantastic, but bit of a disaster too. So they've started building wild comb there. So what do I need to do with this colony? Well, I'm going to take off this. Thankfully the queen wasn't on that. I'm pretty sure she wasn't. Don't know if you saw it, the wind took up the perspex sheet there. I'm going to take off the riser, and I am going to leave them for another few days. And you might say, oh well, that's kind of, believe it or not, that's actually drone comb. So yeah, time to get the finger out, as some people say. And they're starting to build comb up into this bag as well. But they still haven't filled out all the way in the frames either. So this frame here, for example, isn't fully filled out. They're kind of leaning towards more the front of the box. So, you know, I don't really want to be moving them into a full-size box just yet. But I am very pleased with what I'm seeing here. So I'm going to take off the riser, and I'm not going to dip down into them really, because the signs are so positive that, you know, we know that they are filling this box out, and they're not going to last much longer in it. But I would like to get a second box on them kind of before I start putting them in, and let them build up first, and then, and by the second box I mean another brood box on top. Let them go rise up into that, and then transfer when they have those kind of, when they've moved up and start, the queen maybe has started laying in that, in it, then transfer them then into a full-size box. Now my plan actually was to, or maybe still is, to move this colony out into an out apiary, but that's brilliant. Now I do have to be careful, because obviously they are drawing in a lot of nectar, and that is going to, they're going to plug the box pretty quickly. So I don't have too much time to be dilly-dallying with them either before making up my mind. I'm going to drop that on, and the great thing about the panes boxes, well, it's not a great thing, but it can be a bit of a pain, but they have that space to go down into, or to move across into the feeder and build comb there. Now it can be a nuisance obviously, but at the same time, if you know, if you're caught short, I've only a little bit of battery left, but I know that this this nuke here is absolutely storming. I did have to feed them back in February. I fed them, since February I fed them I think 3 bags of fondant altogether. So they've only got fondant, but this colony is, I'm afraid to look inside and see what they're doing in there now, because this riser is on, and I have one of those foil sheets on here between that and that, but I have a funny feeling that they've forced their way up through it, and that they're building comb now. You can hear the bees in there. And there's another one, that red box there, if you can see it, there's another one that they are definitely, they've forced their way up into. In fact, I think I'll show you, I'll lift that and show you. So I haven't looked at it, but I just have a feeling, because I looked at it during the week. Look at that. Ooh, that's a disaster. Time to get a second box on them ASAP, because that's the only thing I can do right now. Because as you can see, these nukes are all collected in a spot. Wasn't meant to be their permanent location at all, and they're to move to out apiaries. But I am behind schedule, and I suppose with the weather being as bad as it was up to now, I kind of didn't really, I couldn't really get in to assess them, and I didn't want to move them off site until I knew what they were like. So those 2 boxes definitely need to be moved off site ASAP, because this is not going to be their permanent location. And on top of that, let's have a look at them. Look, they are up there building comb. I knew it. And let's see if we can. So they're, oh, look at that. Oops, is all I can say. Now, oh, look at that. Starting to build comb. Now they're only just starting, but I reckon under this, because I didn't actually put this front sheet down. Yeah. Well, thankfully they haven't actually started building down here. They have a little bit. Not much though. Yeah. That's manageable, but it's a big colony, so they need a second box on now. Yeah, you can see there they've a bit of comb built down there, and it's packed to nectar already. Now 8% battery left, so I'm going to shut off. There is brood in that too, so better be careful that I don't squish my queen or lose her. Some of these colonies are a bit disappointing. Some of these nukes in particular are a bit disappointing, but others are showing very positive, very positive signs at this early stage. So they're the ones I'm going to obviously focus on for the next week, and get them into their full-size boxes that they need to be, get them into their out apiaries where I want them. And that's the plan. Right, well, thanks for watching, and if you want to keep up to date this summer, I hope to get the videos out. As I said, I've just got a bit caught up, but once the beekeeping season starts, I'm back on it, and it'll be easy for me to make the videos then, because I'll actually be out working the bees. And that's what you do. Like and subscribe. It's free to do it, and that'll keep you up to date with what I'm doing during the summer months. All right, see you in the next one.